Hello there, all my lovely jewelry makers. I'm Christina of CSLdesigns, and in today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to make these infinity wire crochet shapes that you can use to make a pendant, a chain, or anything else you can think of. Now all these pieces will be available for sale in my shop along with other jewelry kits and tutorials. I'm going to leave a link to that in the description box down below. Otherwise, if you want to learn how you can make your own, then keep watching. So these are the materials that we're going to need. Now the wire that I'm using is a regular round silver coated copper wire, and this is a 0.4mm gauge. And the beads that I'm using are 3mm preciosa bicones. They'll add a lovely sparkle, but you can play around with what kinds of beads that you want to add. And then of course we need our findings. So I'm using a lot of claw clasp, an extended chain, and a few jump rings to put it together, and then whatever chain that you want to use. As for the tools, we of course need something to cut our wire, so I'm using my flush cutters here, tweezing those pliers to manipulate the wire, and also for the jump rings. And then of course we can't forget the crochet hook. So I'm using a 1.25mm. It doesn't have to be that specific size, just make sure it's a small one. Now like usual, I'm going to leave the material list and useful links in the description box down below. Otherwise, let's get it all together and let's get started. Then as for the wire that we're using here, I'm going to leave this attached to the reel because that way we have minimum wastage, and I'm going to start working towards one end. So I'm grabbing my crochet hook here and just leave a short little tail. I'm going to put it over my finger and then put the crochet hook in between my finger and the wire, and then I'm just going to spin it around one full rotation so we end up with a loop like this, and that is the first loop. Now from here I'm going to take this long end that's still attached to the reel, and it's going to come behind that loop, and now we need to make a row of loops. So I have my crochet hook through that loop, and then I'm going to grab onto the wire behind it, pull it through to the front there, and then I just want to push the crochet hook through that loop to bring it out further, and then also pull it out a little bit, so something like that. And then to get it flat next to the other loop, I'm going to rotate the crochet hook so the hook part is facing away from me, and then flatten it down so it lays flat next to the first loop. So when we look from the side, you can see they're flat next to each other. And now we have two loops, and we also have a little bit more to hold on to, so it gets a little bit easier. So basically we need to make a row of loops like I said. So again, the wire is coming behind the loop, put the crochet hook through the loop, grab onto that wire, pull it through to the front, and then push the crochet hook through to the widest part here, the shaft just before the handle, and then pull it out a little bit further. Then rotate the crochet hook so the hook is facing away from you, and then push it down flat. So we now have 3 loops in a row, and we're going to continue like this until we have the amount of loops we need for one side of the infinity symbol there. And obviously how many loops you make will also determine how large your piece is going to be. So I now have my row of loops here, and I've ended up with 17 in total. And then what I'm going to do is take my crochet hook that's through that last loop that we made, and then put it through the very first loop again. So I'm going to end up having my crochet hook through 2 loops there, and then you can see we've ended up creating this little teardrop shape. So I'm then going to hold on to the piece below the hook here, and we basically need to now make the other half of the infinity shape. So I'm going to again pull the wire through from the back to the front, and then bring it out a bit, rotate it, and then lay it flat next to the loops that we're coming from. So it looks a little something like this. So basically this part here where currently we have the 2 loops on top of each other is the midpoint. And now I'm going to make another teardrop shape here on the other side that's going to end up forming the full infinity shape. So I'm going from here, from that midpoint you can see we've already done 2 loops, and I then need to make the same amount as we did on the other one. So that's 3, and then all the way until we get the 17. So again I have my 17 loops here from the midpoint. Then I'm taking my crochet hook, it's still through the very final loop that we did, then go through the first loop on this side again, so the middle, and then just bring the loops close together. You can see that then creates the other teardrop shape, so we end up with the full infinity shape. So this is the basic shape in place. Now what I want to do is strengthen this, because right now we just have one layer and it's pretty flexible and kind of flimsy as well. So to make it more durable and stronger, I'm going to again hold on to this and then bring the wire through again from back to the front, pull the wire through a bit, and basically what I want to do is go all the way around, follow the path that I've already made, and add another layer of loops. So from the midpoint here, turn the crochet hook so we can go through the next loop. So just like that, go through the loop while still being through the one we made, so we get that double layer, and then pull the wire through to the front, pull it out a bit, and then bring the crochet hook through the next loop. And then every time you do that, make sure that the wire here at the back, you pull that tight. So basically the loop goes tight around the crochet hook, and we'll get a consistent size all the way. And that also helps tighten up everything a bit. So pull it tight and then pull it through to make the next loop, and repeat all the way along. As you can see, we're working away from the middle there, all the way on one side, and then we'll get back to the midpoint. And we're then going to make sure to do the same thing with the other teardrop shape. So pull the wire through, create a new loop, and then start making that second layer on this side as well. So just go through the very next loop in the path that we already made, and you can already see the difference here. So on this side where I just went through and did another layer, it's much sturdier already, and it looks neater as well, as opposed to this, it's a little bit more flimsy. So just go all the way around back to the middle, and now I'm back in the middle there again. I'm gonna bring the wire through to the front, and again, just pull a little loop through. This time, I'm not going to do any more wire crochet. Instead, we can cut off the wire from the reel. Now, if you don't want to add beads, then you can just cut it with a short little length here and then finish it off. But if you do want to add beads, you can just cut a length of about 20 or 30 centimeters or so. Doesn't have to be too much. And then what I'm going to do is grab the crochet hook again, and this very final loop that we pulled through, I'm just going to then pull the wire all the way through like that, so it's coming out of the front, and I come up through this loop in the middle. So I need to make sure I'm going through a gap that's next to that, so we can basically kind of weave the wire in and out. So I'm just pulling it all the way down to tighten it in place, and that is now also just fastened that very final loop in place there. And then basically we can get this wire into position. So I'm just going up through the next loop and pull it all the way through. Just make sure we don't get any kinks or bends. And it's now coming out of the front here. Now I'm just going to be adding beads in this direction. So I'm going to also do it to every other loop in the piece. So I'm going to do it in the middle, and then every other one after that. So that means the next loop I'm going over is one where I can add in a bead. So just add the bead to your wire, let it drop down, and then I'm gonna add them so the bead sits sideways over the loop like that, which means I'm gonna skip over the loop where I want the bead to sit, and then take the wire and go down through the loop after that. And as I pull it tight, I'm going to make sure the bead ends up sitting sideways over that loop where I want it to. And then I can bring the wire up again. Make sure you're weaving in and out between wires in the crochet that we already made, just so obviously it has a stop rather than just pulling the wire straight through. And straight away I'm going to add the next bead, let it drop all the way down, because I'm then skipping this loop where my wire is coming out from now, and this bead is going to sit over the next one after that. So I'm skipping that loop where the bead is going to sit over and going down through the loop after that. And as I pull that tight, I'm just making sure the bead sits there sideways over the loop. And again, just going in between the wires and the crochet we've already made, coming up through the loop here that's in front of the next one where I want to add a bead, and then you basically just continue like this. So grab your next bead, skip the loop where we want to add the bead, go through the next one, and just keep adding them like this all the way around this teardrop shape. And we get to the middle, just add one there as well, and then just repeat all the way around the other teardrop shape as well. So now we added in the beads, can flip it to the back here, and we literally just need to finish off the ends. So what you need to do is find a place that's close to where your wire is coming out from, where you can basically wrap this wire around a couple of times, because we just need to make sure it's going to be secure when we cut it off. So just wrap it around and pull it tight, and make sure that it's a single wire that we're wrapping around. And then I just like to do that a couple of times in the same place here. So basically coil the end of the wire here around a single wire on the back here within the crochet, and pull that nice and tight. And you can do that 2 to 3 times, it's going to be fine. And then I'm going to just bring the wire around as if I'm wrapping it around one more time, but instead of actually bringing it through, I'm going to cut off the excess, and then just leaving a short little tail there you can feel with your fingers. And then I'm going to make sure to take my tweezers and just squeeze that end in. Just push it in so it gets tucked out of the way and you can't feel it anymore. And then you want to of course finish off the other end in the same way. And then once you've done that, you have your finished infinity shape with beads here. Of course you can leave them out if you don't want them, and you can do with this what you want. So if you want to make it like this, which would be a nice pendant size, like I mentioned, I used 17 loops for one side here, so one teardrop shape. Now it could also be cute to make them smaller, so for instance like this would be really cute for a chain, for a bracelet or something like that. Now these ones I've made with 9 loops for one teardrop shape here, so 1/2 of it. So just to show you the bit of a size difference. And either way, the way you can then use these is by using the actual loops in the crochet itself. So if you wanted to add a chain to this to make it a necklace, I'm just going to grab my tweezers nose pliers here and also an open jump ring, and then you can just choose one of the loops in the crochet and then feed the jump ring through that, and then add whatever you need to, for instance like chain, and then go in and close that up. And then we have a chain attached to it, and of course the same thing on the other side there, so you can have a full necklace. Now if you made a little infinity shape, so for instance to make a chain and you want to attach them to create one length of chain there, again, same principle, you just want to add the jump ring through the very outer loop there in the crochet. So basically the one on either side. And in this case here, I have added a bead, but you just want to feed the jump ring through just the wires that are just behind the bead. And you can attach them together like that and create a nice little chain. So that's how you make this infinity wire crochet pendant or chain links if you want to make them smaller. Now I do have more wire crochet tutorials on my channel along with plenty others, so you can check that out. Otherwise, I really hope you enjoyed this one. Thank you so much for watching it, and I'll see you in the next one.